So it's very rare I get disappointed by a leak, but this story is exactly that. I have been disappointed through and throughout by this new article from Makotakara because they claim the iPad mini that we've been waiting for isn't going to be an iPad Pro refresh. Instead, it's just going to be based on the existing design we've had since 2012. So of course, I am very much in a sad state right now. I hope this is not true, but of course, as usual, let's delve into this. So make sure to like and subscribe, click that notification for the latest Apple news and rumors. And with that being said, let's just tuck in. So yeah, this story kind of caught me off guard, I can't lie, because of course, we've been getting some credible information from Makotakara that has made a lot of sense so far. For example, they reported on the iPad 9 that's also launching in March. That seems to be pretty credible and also corroborates with other information from other sources. And the same goes towards the 2021 iPad Pros. I've made many videos on them. You can check out on the icon above. But essentially, a lot of that info was from Makotakara, and a lot of it did seem pretty credible because A, they were very specific about certain things, and B, like I said, it corroborated with other information out there. But this information about the iPad mini came out of the blue, and it kind of goes against everything we've been hearing about this 2021 refresh. So in their words, they mentioned the iPad mini will have a narrow frame like the iPad Air 3 from 2019, and it will look very similar to the upcoming iPad 9, which should also adopt this iPad Air 3/iPad Pro 10.5-inch design as well. Also, another thing they mention obviously is Lightning and Touch ID is staying, and when they say Touch ID, it's not the Touch ID on the iPad Air where it's integrated into the power button, it's gonna be a home button on the front. So yeah, that means the design is largely gonna stay the same as it's been for pretty much forever. Now of course, because it's supposed to have narrower bezels like the iPad Pro 10.5-inch and the iPad Air 3, the display is gonna be slightly bigger at 8.4 inches. So I guess that is a positive, but at the end of the day, I would much rather take a more modern design at the same screen size as it is right now than retain the same forehead and chin we've had since 2012 for a slightly bigger display. We also, on top of all of this, have Apple Pencil 1 support. So not even the new Apple Pencil that attaches on the side, we're getting the old one, which charges in the most retarded way possible. So yes, I am very disappointed about all of this. Now I guess the only sort of credible and not so disappointing news they mention is the fact this iPad mini will be released in March, so much like other reports have said, we should expect this at some sort of virtual March event alongside the upcoming iPad Pros. So of course, as someone who analyzes these leaks, I want to delve into possible reasons why this unfortunately could be possible and why this doesn't seem possible. So let's get the not possible stuff out of the way first, because of course we need some hope. And the first thing is, the iPad mini in the past has been based on the iPad Air. You see, this report suggests that Apple's moving the iPad mini to a lower end market, I guess, because they're saying it's going to be a smaller version of the iPad 9, not the 4th generation iPad Air we currently have. And well, that really doesn't add up, because if you take a look at the iPad mini 5 we have right now, you might notice it was very much based on the iPad Air 3 in many aspects. For example, they shared pretty much the same design language, the same chip, the same amount of RAM, the same display technology, etc. You were just choosing between two great sizes. And so a lot of us kind of assumed that, hey, if Apple bases the iPad mini on the current gen iPad Air, then surely the next version of the iPad mini will be based on the current iPad Air, which has the iPad Pro-like design. Also, it feels odd to me that Apple's going to go through the effort of redesigning this iPad, and yet they're still going to keep the same forehead and chin design. You see, it makes sense to bring a redesign on the iPad 9 because essentially it's using the design that Apple's used with the iPad Air 3 and the iPad Pro 10.5-inch, and so R&D costs are going to be very low. But we've never had an 8.4-inch iPad. Apple's going to have to redesign this and actually put R&D costs into this. And so if they're doing that in the first place, then why won't they just go ahead and go all in on an iPad Pro-like redesign? You see, even if this report said, hey, the next iPad mini is going to look identical to the previous one, that would actually make sense because of course Apple knows the iPad mini isn't very popular, and so maybe in a bid to save costs, they keep the design the same and of course just update the internals like they've been doing for the last few generations. But the fact they're going to go through the hassle of actually updating and making the screen slightly bigger and giving it a slight redesign, why would they just do that and then not give us the iPad Pro redesign we've all been begging for? Yeah, I'm just very confused. And another really confusing aspect about this is price. How will this iPad mini be priced if it's not going to have the redesign we were hoping for? So initially, my basis on the price was that, hey, if Apple gives us a redesign, then of course it's going to be slightly more expensive than the current model, but in the past, the iPad mini has been $100 cheaper than the iPad Air, and so if the iPad Air is now $599 because of course it saw a price hike due to the redesign, then it makes sense for the iPad mini to be $499 this year. But you see, if Apple keeps the design roughly the same, which means that they could probably keep the price the same, then why would someone buy this over the iPad 9 at $299? Now yes, I know that many people buy the iPad mini for the size, and so even if it is slightly more expensive for a smaller design, that probably won't put off people who actually adore the size of the iPad mini. But at the same time, for average folks, it's not exactly going to make sense that the smaller model is $100 more expensive, and of course we know Apple isn't going to make the iPad mini $100 cheaper than the iPad 9. That's going to be $199, and of course we know Apple would never sell an iPad new for that low of a price, so that's pretty much ruled out. That will never happen. And so imagine how confusing the lineup will be if Apple has a more expensive, smaller version of the iPad 9 that has the same design, same display, pretty much the same hardware, and so you're pretty much paying more to get a smaller iPad. That makes zero sense. I mean, think about it, with the iPhone 12 series, the 12 mini is $100 cheaper than the 12 because guess what? Smaller objects mean less price. That's how things work, and so the iPad mini having this design really doesn't make a lot of sense in terms of pricing to me. However, it is my job to look at two sides of the argument when it comes to these leaks, and so let's now discuss why this unfortunately could be possible. So first of all, could be just down to R&D costs. So of course, when it comes to Apple's lower-end iPads, they rarely redesign them because of course that's going to end up being more expensive, and they know that they can save money by just reusing older iPad Pro designs instead. And so that's why Apple can offer something like the iPad 9 at $300 or something like the iPad Air at $599, and that's because they're not new designs. They've been around for years, and so Apple's just reusing all this tooling and all those molds for this design, and ultimately that means they can make these devices super cheaply. But because the iPad mini is smaller, and of course the fact that Apple only gives us one small iPad per like 3 years, Apple has no modern design that they can reuse for the iPad mini. And so Apple really has two options. They can either, of course, just keep reusing the design they've had since 2012, which would be a very bad idea, or of course give us a redesign. And maybe Apple's thinking is that, hey, the iPad mini isn't very popular, okay? As much as the tech community loves their small devices, iPad minis aren't incredibly that popular for Apple. The Air and the Pro and the budget iPads are really the best sellers, and so Apple's thinking is that maybe, hey, we shouldn't have to spend so much on R&D on this all-new iPad Pro-like redesign, and instead, why don't we just save some money and go for this slight redesign that really doesn't count as a redesign? And so while I initially thought that it would be kind of stupid for Apple to keep the forehead and chin if they're redesigning the iPad mini, I can see it saving Apple a ton of money, and Timothy being the money guy, this might be the way. Also, a quick mention to Michael from Twitter. He pointed this out to me, which is a really good point. But if Apple were to adopt an iPad Pro-like design and use the Apple Pencil on the iPad mini, the Apple Pencil will actually be too big to fit magnetically on the side of the iPad mini. I forgot to consider that, but that is true, because if this iPad mini is going to be smaller in form factor with this iPad Pro-like design, then of course Apple can't use the Apple Pencil 2. It's simply too big to fit on the side comfortably on the iPad mini. And of course Apple isn't going to redesign and make an Apple Pencil mini specifically for a low volume device like the iPad mini, and so that could be another issue with this iPad Pro redesign that we've been waiting for. Now, there is another possibility that maybe Apple's doing this to possibly boost iPad Air sales and make that the default iPad instead of offering two options like they have in the past. And maybe they're just doing this refresh as Air, we have to do a refresh, so here's a small one, take it or leave it. Because of course, people who absolutely love the size of the iPad mini will probably still buy this model, because of course it's going to have a bigger screen while keeping the same form factor. And yes, it has a forehead and chin, which is going to be super ugly in 2021, but ultimately there is no other iPad that offers that form factor, and so that exclusivity is going to force them to buy this, and pretty much they have to accept what little changes Apple brings to the iPad mini line. And as for other people who might have considered the iPad mini for various reasons but aren't really adamant on having that size, now they can see that, hey, that $200 jump to the iPad Air for the more modern design does seem more appealing, and so Apple can possibly boost sales of that device. Of course, I am just theorizing and giving you guys my opinion, but tell me in the comments below, what do you think Apple's going to be doing with this iPad mini refresh? Do you see this happening, or are you still hoping for that iPad Pro like redesign? Tell me in the comments below. But anyways, thank you guys for watching. Make sure to like and subscribe. Click that bell notification for the latest Apple news and rumors. Check out a video here in the icon above about the original iPad mini redesign that we're all hoping for and hopefully does end up happening. And on that note, I'll see you guys in the next one. See you, peeps.